What is going on, everybody? Car Guy V8 here, and in this video we're going to get technical. I love making these types of videos. So we're going to be talking about how tire size affects your effective gear ratio. Now, I'm not talking about your actual final drive ratio that is in the differential. If you have 342 gears in your rear differential, that will always be 342s unless you actually change out the ring gear and pinion. But what you can change is the effective gear ratio, and you can do that by changing the tire size. So how can we figure out what your effective gear ratio is currently, and how can we change it to better suit your needs? Let's talk about it. The effective gear ratio is most commonly based on a 26-inch tall tire. What that means is if you're running a 342 rear gear and you're running a 26-inch tall tire, you are truly putting down an effective gear ratio of 3.42 to 1 to the ground. Now, real quickly, I can tell you the easiest way to see what your effective gear ratio is right now, and it doesn't even take any calculators. I've used this method numerable times, and it is accurate. So take your vehicle and drive 75 miles an hour, of course, preferably where the speed limit is 75, and hold it in the 1-to-1 gear. With most automatics, that's third gear, and with most manuals, that's fourth gear. But of course, if you have a more modern vehicle or an import, you might have to look up your automatic or manual transmission gear ratios of that specific vehicle to figure out what your 1-to-1 gear is, and drive 75 miles an hour with it in that gear, and your RPMs will roughly be your effective gear ratio of what you're putting to the ground. For instance, if your tachometer says 3,550 RPMs, you're probably putting down an effective gear ratio of 355 to 1. Of course, there are some other mechanical variables in play, so it will probably vary by a good 100 or so RPMs, but you can get a good baseline of what your actual effective gear ratio is by this simple test. But now let's go ahead and get into the good part of the video where we see how tire size affects your rear gear ratio. So I'm going to pull up my handy calculator here if this thing will unlock. All right, I got it up here. So just for argument's sake, let's say you have a 28-inch tall tire and you're running we'll just use the same 342 rear axle gear. So let's see. So if you take the 26-inch tall tire and you divide it by 28, you'll get 928 thousandths, basically. So that 342 gear, we're going to multiply this number by the 3.42 axle ratio. So you will see with 28-inch tall tires, your effective gear ratio will be about 3.175. And so if you drove at 75 miles an hour, with this 28-inch tall tire and the 342 axle ratio, that would probably be your RPM at 75, your effective gear ratio. I mean, you can do this, say you've got a 31-inch tall tire. So we're going to do 26 divided by 31. That would be 838 thousandths times, we'll say 410. So 410, of course, is the gear in your rear end, but it acts like basically acts like a 342 with those 31-inch tall tires. So that would tell you, you can do the opposite of this. If you go 31 divided by 26, that'd be 1.19, and you do times 410, you would need a 488 gear with that 31-inch tall tire to act the same as it does with a 26-inch tall tire. Does that make sense? I know this gets a little technical. It even confuses me sometimes. I'm just a redneck, so I'm not that smart myself. Well, now let's do another. So say you've got the very common, say the 26.6-inch tire. You know, that's the 295 50/15, very popular muscle car tire. So if you base it on the 26-inch tire as well, your ratio will not change that much. If you're running 373s with the 26.6-inch tire, that's really not much of a change. You probably won't even notice that. A 364 would be your effective gear ratio with 373 rear gears. So let's do one more. I'll use my old truck, the Green Machine, as the example here. It was a really good truck, a 302 truck, automatic, weighed about 4,000 pounds. And whenever I got it, it had a 30.6-inch tire, and it had a 355 rear gear ratio, but it just always felt sluggish. So let's see, did that wrong, 26 divided by 30.6. So you can see about 0.85 times 3.55. You can see it was putting about 302 to the ground, which 302 to 1, which is kind of sad for a 302 truck. You really need a better gear than that. So I went with a 410. So we'll just do 4.10 gears times, that was 0.85. So you can see after the 410 gear change, it increased my effective gear ratio pretty drastically. And then I went with 26.6-inch tall tires times 4.10. And there you can see after a tire change and a rear gear change, I increased its gear ratio dramatically, and that was a change you could truly feel in that truck. It transformed it completely. But guys, pick up a calculator, look up online what some tire sizes are, and start doing some calculations. You can see what the best gear ratio and tire size is for your specific truck. Like some people want to go the other way, you know, go with much bigger tires than with smaller tires. So you can see what gear ratio you need for it to act the same as with your current tires, or you can change your tire size to a smaller size so that you can get just a little more gear ratio, a little more acceleration out of it. This kind of calculating is fun. Pick up that calculator, guys. Let me know what you think about this video in the comments. Let me know if it helped you any, and y'all have a nice day.